Welcome to episode 48 of the Critical Fools podcast. This week, we'll be discussing and reviewing a 1997 film called As Good as It Gets, directed by James Brooks. One thing I think people find interesting about the director is that he also co-created The Simpsons, and he's actually well known for some other films like Terms of Engagement, I believe, and The Mary Tyler Moore Show. Terms of Endearment. My correction, but like these are like little things because he's done a broad breadth of work that I think people like. They see his name like in different places, they don't realize they're like, oh wow, it's like someone who's really made a lot of, I think, American culturally significant TV shows or films in the last let's say 35 40 years. I'm actually curious because it's a film that I think a lot of people don't know about or don't discuss anymore, even though it won awards in the 90s. So I'm curious, like, just your backdrop. Have you heard of this film before, Alexis? Or what was your initial? Were you surprised, like maybe just watching it too, because like you had not heard of it, and you were surprised maybe after, like, I wish maybe I should have heard about this film. I'm just curious, like your initial take, because this film, I feel like it's gone lost a little bit in the modern American culture.
Sure, yeah. I mean, personally, I've never heard of this film. You were telling me that. That's also what was interesting. Now that I'm looking at it, is that Hans Zimmer actually wrote like a good bit of the soundtrack, which is like, wow, okay, like it's some heavy hitters now. Like the main actor, Jack Nicholson, and he's been in so many films throughout his career. Everyone knows that. Helen Hunt, I'm a little less familiar with, but I know she's been around. And then obviously Cuba Gooding Jr., that was like at the beginning of his career. Like he's been in so many films since. But I'd honestly never heard of this film. I thought that Jack Nicholson was phenomenal in this. Yeah, I mean, we can get into it a little bit more, but those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, I actually rewatched this film over the holidays, and it clicked in my brain that it would be a decent candidate to discuss, just because like I wouldn't say the movie like blew my mind away or like it's going to be like a 10 out of 10, but rewatching it also like we'll get into it, like some of the cultural sensibilities have changed. There's a lot of jokes in this film that I don't think would be made now, like given the climate.
Homophobia.
Yeah, homophobia. I think there's also a scene where he's making fun of the Jewish people, and even black people.
Everybody.
Yeah, and I don't think
person.
Yeah, especially like his character being a affluent writer, even with the mental health issues he has. Like I don't think this film could be made today. So I mean, we can maybe discuss. Maybe you disagree, but I don't think that film like this would be made today, given who was making the jokes. Even if it's a fictional character, but also like it's one of, in my opinion, one of Jack Nicholson's like more unique performances, because he's done The Shining, he's done all these things, but like he basically played somebody with like really crazy level of OCD, and that must have been a challenge too, because I think I know we discussed this off camera, but like it's funny, but also it feels like that it's so cringe, like when you're hearing the scratch on the wall like kind of moments too with this character, and I think he does a really great job. I think his performance is why you feel that way. I think the rest of the cast is just okay, like they just do their job kind of thing, but he's definitely the standout. And also this film is like one of those like slice of life types, so like we'll be able to talk about maybe different topics they touch upon. But yeah, I mean it's okay, so I guess to get started, like what did you like, did your like initial impressions of the character, like what were your thoughts of Jack's character? I think his actual fictional name is Melvin, right?
Yeah, Melvin. I mean, he was a very quirky, sort of bizarre character who he has a lot of opinions, and like he fails to like often listen to others. Like he's one of those like very sort of brash, abrasive kind of characters, but yet he's quirky, and it's funny. He kind of loathes human emotion, but yet he yearns for it at the same time, right? Like he always like makes fun of him, and he's like, you gay people, you're supposed to be like in touch with feelings and blah blah blah. And he's like, how come you can't understand? And then he like contradicts himself, like the next like line, or like he's like kind of like heartbroken or has a crush, and he's mad that it's not working out. But yeah, it was, his character was very difficult to portray, right? And so I give Jack a lot of credit. He was probably the most redeeming the most redeeming quality of this film was Jack Nicholson's like star acting.
I agree. I think he carries his film. He deserves. I don't know who else was up for 1997, but he definitely. I can't really qualm that he won it.
Mhm.
We can really discuss if his co-star should have won hers, but
I
will
think
say that
in his
he was good too.
really
Yeah.
brief appearances.
So speaking about Melvin, I thought what was interesting. There's a lot. I think we're gonna talk about him a lot, but like, what was funny was that like his career is as a fictional romance writer.
Mhm.
And like it's him, right? So you're watching him throughout the film. You're thinking like, how is this guy, like, how is he a bestseller?
Mhm.
And then like he's asked by like the one fan, right? And she goes like, what? Well, how do you understand women so much? And his answers is so funny, but it's like really like it wouldn't be made today. I think of a man, and then I just remove all reason,
all personality and sensitivity.
It was just like, wow, brutal. Yeah. And yeah, it's like one of those things where I go back to what I said earlier in the episode where like I just don't know if that would be made today in today's climate, but I laughed at that because it was like he's so, like you said, like abrasive and also direct in many ways. Like he kind of says what's on his mind, right? Like when he meets Frank for the first time, which is Cuba's character, he makes some pretty racist jokes about the guy, and
but he learns really, like, Cuba calls him on his crap.
Yeah.
And then he respects him a little more. That's why he never really respected Simon, because it's like he just took everything that Melvin gave.
Yeah. And then he had the relationship with his parents that was rough and stuff. And we'll get, I think this is a movie we'll probably talk more about the characters and what they represent maybe versus like maybe the story arc, because the story is very simplistic, right? It's like it's almost like a true slice of life, right? Like people just meet and they have life experiences together, and some are more meaningful than others, right? And I think when I think of this film, having seen it, like actually it's probably my third time seeing it, I realize that maybe is the context of the film, is that like you don't ever decide who your neighbor is, you don't ever decide who your coworkers are, usually, if like, or not all your coworkers, or who you meet at like your first day of class, and like these just people you meet, and then like some people you only meet for a moment, and other people you might spend like a lifetime with.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the things I took away from this film, because the film is really about different people's relationships, whether that's like friendship or the neighbor or just like acquaintances and stuff. And because if you think about Jack, like he doesn't really, sorry, not Jack, Melvin's character, right? They don't ever really explore his own family dynamic. He talks a little, he has references a few times. He had parents, obviously he did, but like he doesn't really talk about like his family or friends outside of like, his past or anything. Like, it seems like he didn't have many or any at all. And but like this people he meets in this sequence of this film, the events during this film, is what breaks him through and he forms some relationships with. And I think that's something that I think that can speak to anybody. I think that's why probably this movie during the time had very had an appeal. But as time has gone on, like films are tackling bigger issues, or there's a lot of films that can do the same message. So like it's like a film that can be easily forgotten. I think that's why it has been forgotten. But yeah, I'm just curious, like, at a story level, what did you think of the film? And am I right? I mean, do you disagree or agree with my take on that?
No, I mean, there's nothing I can disagree with. My I guess big issue with this film is it was kind of slow for me. I don't know, like I would liken it to another like sort of romance, like rom-com that we had previously reviewed, which is 500 Days of Summer. I didn't quite feel like that was slow, even though it had like a lot of similarities in terms of like difficulties between people and relationships, right? And sort of a feeling like obviously the two main characters handled their love interest, or like their attraction towards a love interest, a little differently, even though they suffered from like somewhat similar dynamics in some way, in terms of like they were trying to get the people that they had crushes on to like be interested, but they were both kind of awkward at times about how they going about it and communicate. That was the other thing. The communication from the male characters was not great a lot of the times.
Yeah.
My issue with like this film specifically, and what I didn't have an issue with 500 Days of Summer, is they made I think the characters a little too like, they were either like good, like obviously Melvin was quirky and bad and it was always his fault, but like how they wrote Helen's character was like she was just a struggling single mom who like had no faults basically, and I guess that was like one of my big issues with like this film. Whereas like with 500 Days of Summer, right, and they try to in this film they try to go into like all the characters with all the angles. Whereas 500 Days of Summer, it was clearly from the dude's perspective, so you're seeing it all through his eyes, but not necessarily what the female character that kind of rejects him is going through at all times. So that's why I had less of an issue with that film, and I think more of an issue. Like I got kind of bored. I was like, a lot of this stuff is like really cliche. Honestly, yeah, at times I struggle to like get through like finishing this film.
Yeah, it's one of those films where I can't rewatch it.
I get what they were saying, like trying to do is like you never know who your neighbor's going to be or how you might change and things like that. It's just like a lot of the characters, Jack Nicholson's aside, they were just written a little too plainly for me.
They were kind of caricatures, right? Because even Simon, we can start with each of the characters. Like,
yeah, and I guess
let's do the main three, right? Let's do Simon and Carol. But like Simon was like the typical, like at the 1990s, I can get it, right? Like it's the typical caricature of what you think a gay guy is, right? Like that. It was like very, like you're right. Other than Melvin's character, like it was very like, go ahead.
There was no complexity to his character.
Yeah, he was an artist, and he got, you know, like you said, his one character flaw was that he was too naive, and he got, you know, stolen from and beat up. I will say that like the story he shared in the car was like, that was an interesting angle where like, you know, he was drawing his.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, but like it was just so cliche where he was just like, he was really feminine, like never really stood up for himself, right? Super like victimized. It's like, dude, write a little bit more like character complexity. It was just like I get annoyed when it is like just too overtly like cliched.
Yeah, no, that's. I mean, I can't disagree because like I thought his character. The only thing I thought that was an interesting angle was when it's revealed of like why he doesn't talk to his parents. I thought like that could have been explored earlier, maybe, and actually been like something to build upon.
Artistic taste, and then that was it, and then everything's kumbaya with him.
Yeah, that was.
I was like, okay,
too simplistic of a narrative. Again, like you said, Jack is the one that I keep saying Jack. But Melvin's characters.
I would have very much struggled to finish this.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why I think he deserves his award because I think if he's not killing it, like it's just really like the other two characters are like role players, right? Like it's not like a movie where like there's just you can tell there's like 3 or 2 stars. It's like role players, and then there's Melvin's character, which again I thought was very sensible. Where like he made progress, but nothing like like suddenly he's just like changed man, right? Like it's realistic progress for him. But I think you're right with Simon's character. I was just like, okay, they kind of sped through up like, oh yeah, like you said, he clicked for him and now everything's better. And then with Carol, like, you know, who knows, right? But sticking with Simon before we get to Carol. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I thought also it's interesting is that I've seen this actor before and like around. I have to think of other movies and maybe I'll pick one, but in the future. But I thought also like, again, solid performance, but like to your point, like he's playing like a caricature and it's not bad. Like I think I like him more than Carol actually. So it goes like Melvin.
Oh, Melvin. Okay.
Yeah, Melvin first, Simon, then Carol, and you know Simon.
More so, I would say.
Because at least with Simon, you can say, okay, they rushed it. They could have had more depth, but like they had a little bit in there with the family backdrop, like his family situation, and that was like an interesting take.
Like skill, like he I think the actor did a better job with that character than Carol did.
Yeah, and like at least like they were able to connect like his gift, his artistic gift being also the reason why he doesn't talk to his folks, right? Like I thought like could have been put in earlier, maybe even developed a little bit more. You know, Carol's if you notice is that each of the characters, I think this is what they were going for, Alexis, is that each of the characters has their crutch, right? Melvin, it's the OCD mental health. Carol, it's the sick kid and the no husband. And then with Simon, it's the, you know, his artistic gift is also the reason why he has no family structure, right? And I think they were trying to tackle them at the same time, but I think to your point, there was more missed than hit, and actually only one character they did it right.
Which is Melvin's.
So like jumping onto Carol, like I guess we set up for that. We're like she's probably our most disappointing character in this film in the sense of like, okay, she has a sick kid. We feel for that. There's some really powerful scenes with her, like, you know, in the sense of like.
I don't think it was necessarily the actress's fault. It was just the writing for her character. I think just wasn't that great.
Yeah, I think her performance was the best she could get out of the role. Yeah, she has like when she calls out Melvin in the restaurant, that's a good scene. When she's giving him the thank you note, right, and he's reading it, or he says he doesn't need, like he doesn't have to read, it's an awkward situation where she wants to thank him for what she's doing for her son, and he doesn't really reciprocate it. Yeah, their dynamic. It's interesting how the awkwardness wasn't like it was awkward, but like it somehow flowed. I'll give both the actors credit there. And also, I think her most like probably what won her the award was that scene where she was with her mom and she's crying. She says like, I just want to, be a. Again, I don't think this will be made now because we believe in strong women, but I just want to be like a woman again. It's pretty much her message, right? Like I just want to be like held hands and have like a normal like romantic, like you say, cliche and it's cheesy, but I think that's what won her the thing.
You think that would be an issue today?
I mean,
let's dig into this a little bit. I'm kind of curious.
I just don't know if that would be made like that today, because basically, it's sending a message like, a woman can't be like, her own independent self and like she can't just like have fulfillment from herself. Yeah.
Oh, but like, okay. I don't think I'm just saying. I think that's just what her character like wants, but I don't think they're trying to make a broader message of like every person needs a man necessarily.
But understanding how, yeah, I mean, I see your point. I'm just saying, like, to me, how everything's psychoanalyzed now. I'm just telling you, it would be there'll be some pushback in the mainstream.
Yeah, I know, but I guess my issue with that is like, well, in the character's position. I mean, Carol's a single mom, and that's a lot of responsibility, especially like you see how many times they go to the ER, and obviously, like her character would want someone to try to help her, like emotionally and probably financially specifically, because it wasn't until Melvin's character came and stepped in because he had some privilege, he had a lot of contacts, so he was able to set her up with like a legit doctor. Then that a lot of that burden starts like weighing off of her a little bit. The kid actually got treatment. So like her saying that, like if you're saying it's problematic, I'm not. I think within the context of her character, it's exactly what she needed. I don't know if they're necessarily trying to make any broader societal statements.
I think at the time they're definitely not. I'm giving you the critique that I know that critiques of today would have of that.
Yeah, and I've heard some of those critiques silly because it's not like everyone needs one, but it definitely helps, especially like say income wise, helping two people make money, and not to mention the emotional support of having a partner who lets you through that.
It also crossed my mind, like maybe the film that hasn't aged well is because like a lot of maybe even the people in Hollywood don't want it to revisit it too much, because of some of the jokes and stuff.
Honestly, I think it's because the romantic drama like films, they've become kind of saturated. I think it's probably why this kind of has gotten forgotten. This film was good, but it was nothing special.
Yeah, and I agree. My rating will reflect that, but but it's I just still find it curious just because of the actors and also the awards it won, right? Usually like that carries like enough oomph to like keep it alive, but like honestly this movie's probably buried. We're probably the only one who's gonna have an upload about this video.
Well, and this movie was just so 90s too in the way it was filmed, its feel.
Yeah, that's true.
That hasn't always aged well necessarily for the era.
So a little side topic. What did you so there's this character that's like hooking up with Carol like in the beginning of the film, and then her kid gets snot and she gets this like it kills the mood, right? Mm-hmm. I'm just curious, like A, have you been in that kind of situation, and B, like how would you have handled that
situation? What do you mean?
Like just something awkward like that, It doesn't have to be a kid, but like something where it just kills the vibe, and you're like, oh, huh?
Like seeing a single mom.
Or I don't know, yeah, something like that, or like maybe I don't know, like I guess maybe the second question is better. Like, how would you handle that situation?
Look, and I think that's a big issue with not issue. I think it's one of the big difficulties with single mom. It's like a lot of people, like your priority is your kid, right? So if you're trying to find a partner or a date, it's just going to be difficult because it's like another, like even what does the dude say? He's like, this is a little too much reality for a Friday night.
Yeah,
right.
That's what he said. Yeah.
Especially when they're like trying to get to know each other, and he's like, dude, it's just a lot to be to come in and eventually like put yourself into like this kid's life, and he's not necessarily yours, but then you're like, if things go well, no matter what happens with the mom, like it's the mom plus one or +2 if you want to count the grandma too, right? So that's a lot to deal with.
And it sounds like it was like a first or second type of date, right?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, it's pretty too quick to react. Even though I my first thought, maybe because I'm more of a old school guy, how I was raised, like I thought like she escalated too quickly first date, but okay.
Was it the first date?
It sounded like it was either the first or second. I thought that was pretty quick.
Oh, and the dude was just so awkward. I don't know why they wanted to paint him so awkward.
Yeah, I don't know if that was by design or not, but it was
licking her forehead. I was like, what is going on?
Yeah, that was so weird. But maybe, you know what? Maybe they're making it awkward because maybe they're implicitly making a statement that I know you have articulated, like you just said, in a sense, that their dating pools are going to be different, and it's going to be a little bit tougher.
Well, it's a reality, man. And I always find it funny. Like I've heard some videos of like some single moms saying that they would never date a dude with kids, and which I just find totally weird and ironic.
People have a hard time seeing themselves in the mirror.
Yeah,
I know we talked about some negatives of the film. We can always return to that. I'm just curious, like, what would you think were strong points of this film, like beyond Melvin? Like, is there anything, like any scenes or themes that stuck out to you?
That didn't feature Melvin?
Or they did, but it wasn't about Melvin. Like, I can think of a few. I'm just thinking, like, if you had any. I mean, I can start with my example if you want. That helps. But
that was like, you could tell Cuba Gooding Jr. was supposed to be like, I forgot his actual character's name, but he was supposed to be Simon.
Frank.
And like as soon as like you couldn't market or make money off him, he dropped him kind of like a fly. And it really wasn't the end. Was Melvin who was the one who had Simon's back. So interaction was just a little messed up because Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character stuck up with Melvin when they had the art gallery and things were going well, but as soon as that dried up, he was just left by the wayside.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also like something that we both can speak to, right? Like that's something that you'll meet people like that always. That like if you're useful to them, they'll keep you around, but as soon as you're not, or their life has pivoted, like they're just
friends too.
Yeah, they'll just dump you, or they'll just like not prioritize you, which is fine. Like I think it depends on the person. Like this hurts more if you knew this person for 10 years, but like if you.
But we definitely have somebody who's had a lot of friendships, but that's only because they had a lot of money and they couldn't see that.
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about. Or access to some actually still has that problem. But yes.
Oh yeah, you got to choose your friends wisely.
But I think it's all relative, right? Like I have had, like if somebody who I known for like let's say 5-10 years blew me off, that would hurt more if there wasn't a real reason than like somebody I just met for like a month or two or whatever, right?
Yeah, I've definitely had situations like that where it's like happened and you still don't know because people.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you one that I have recently. Like the comedian guy that I befriended. Like he's his ex has returned in his life, and we chat here and there. But like honestly, I think I get the signal that like I'm.
Oh, that's something that needs to be revisited further off pod. No, I'm curious because I remember you talking about this person. But anyway, like just keeping to that. Yeah, no, I mean, there's someone I was like pretty good friends with in college, and he dropped off the face of the earth. And a lot of our friend group from college were like, "What the hell happened?"
Yeah, I know you're referencing to, but it's one of those things where I just don't take it personally because it's like it was like a month or two I knew the guy, right? But like obviously I knew him for 5 years, have been a hit different, but like that happens to life, right? And I think those are the little, like again, that's why I asked the question, because those are the little things I found in this movie that was kind of like maybe remind me where like, yeah, the movie's not going to be my go-to to watch like every like year, but like whenever I have rewatched it, because it's been like every time I rewatch it, I feel like it's been like a 3-year, 4-year gap. And like I just go like, okay, that little moment, like that's actually a good scene there. Like for me, one of the ones I like is like when they're sharing those stories in the car, and Melvin has the great monologue about like, yeah, we keep thinking like, he's like, the reason we feel sad is because like, deep down we know that like, yeah, there's people who have it worse than us, but like there's also a lot of people who probably have never had your shitty experience, and and it just sucks to know that, and I always like Melvin. I was just like, he's just speaking truth, dude. Like he's quirky, he's got his issues, but he's speaking truth, Sure. But also like
I guess that was a thing, and that's why he was more robotic.
Yeah,
like he didn't want to deal with emotions, and like you could just tell him, like, can you just be human for a minute?
Yeah. He's like, you're killing this. Like that's not, because Simon, because his angles. I remember he's worried that like Simon's he's being a third wheel to Simon.
Uh-huh.
Remember, like that's the vibe I'm getting from that scene. Where he's like, he feels like he's being like left out, and so he's like, no, I have a tough story too. Like, yeah, your parents did that, but like my dad hit me or whatever. Yeah,
Absorbed.
Huh? He is pretty self-absorbed.
Yeah, in the movie, that was one of his biggest like downfalls.
Yeah,
or like character plot, character deficiencies.
but he's working on that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, he gave that amazing compliment to Carol, right? You make me want to be a better man. You know, I'm gonna take my medicine. I was just like, dang, cliche. Where these things work? I'm telling you, they do work. But the timing's gotta be right. But they work.
That's the one thing I found. It's like there's something about that archetype of like how like females always want to try to change the dude. It's like it's kind of like the Beauty and the Beast character of like turning the beast into like, Prince Charming. And I don't know what it is with that, or like what drives women to like want to do that. You hear that all the time, right? The cliche of like, oh yeah, like they always want to try to turn the bad boy into like, a good character. It was the same thing with this, right? I mean, Melvin had all these deficiencies, right? And it's like, oh, she was around him and kind of like wants to try to like, transform him in a way. And
yeah, so
hold on. I always find that weird because I've never heard a dude say, I want to change her. I don't think, not a one can I point to.
I'm trying to think myself. I can't recall. But I have a theory on this because I have some new.
Can you think of one of like one dude's like, yeah, like, oh man, especially someone who like may have been a little promiscuous and it's like, yeah, I want to get with her and I want to change her, like try to transform her in a way. I've never heard a dude speak like that.
I personally haven't, but I've listened to so many podcasts that the only archetype I can see is like the guy that ends up dating that stripper or porn star ends up saying,
they're like incredibly few and far between. It's not enough to be like a.
Yeah. I agree. No, like, so for me, I have a piece of evidence that might help.
Hold on, before you go, because those are very like people who make it to the top of pods, right? They're there because they're different and they're entertaining. How many people do you know who are dudes who would want to date someone who is like a sex worker?
0. Okay, yeah. But I have one piece of evidence if you want a potential answer, because you said you found it curious, is that I was having a conversation with another friend of mine, and she was telling me, because I made a comment saying like, I'm ready now maybe to think of relationships seriously because like my evolution in my youth and the journey I made, and I felt like I had to climb the mountain personally. And she pushed back saying like, well, there's also beauty with growing together. And the way she implied it was like, you can change, I can't say the name on the pod, but
their point was there's beauty in growing together. Okay.
Yeah. And when you grow, you change. Right. So I think to answer your kind of question of maybe why women think this way is I think they have this, I'm generalizing a little bit, but I think just to point to some other evidence that would support why we see this archetype is that I think they view growth as like, we can evolve together and grow together, which I understand, but there's a point I know you said this to me many times, like you got to be okay with who you are. And then, and your evolution, like, it's not just like, you can just change because you to your point, I think the problem is the crux is that you think you can change somebody to what you think they should be. Right.
And that's where the sort of the manipulation and the arrogance comes in. Because it's like, it's great to like, and I think people will change to a certain extent, but I've heard people, it's like, and this is where the whole mentality comes from, where like some females that I know have gotten trapped into like constantly saying F boys, right? And then they, like, after a while they get, I'm sure you've heard this too, they get jaded, right? In a little bit, and then pretty much the whole rhetoric of all men are trash starts to creep in. And it's like, well, you got to look at what you keep going with. You're trying to turn an F-boy into like an all-star husband, and that doesn't always work that way, right? And you got to think of from the dude's perspective too. Like and I think that's where that disconnect starts to like come in. It's like you're not really self-analyzing what you're doing, so that you can potentially make better decisions, so that you could potentially have better outcomes.
Yeah, and so my pushback in that conversation I had a while back was like, yeah, I get the growth together, but like if you think you can just control what growth goes to, like you're in for a rude awakening. Yeah, so I think that's the pitfall that you're talking about. Like that's the failure. Yeah.
What does this person say that they envision growth together to be?
Their vision. Yeah.
No, but like what? Like, give me some.
It was very vague. It was kind of like
vague. What? Like having kids. Like you don't necessarily.
Yeah, like a healthy relationship, partnership, and common experiences. I don't know. I didn't ask.
I guess that's my point. Like, obviously, like when you're with someone, you're gonna grow together. But it's this idea that you think that they're gonna change for you, and I'm the special one to be able to do that. That's what I found a little arrogant.
Yeah, it is arrogant in general. I agree.
Like, it's
Okay.
fun. Like, say someone's like you're with someone forever, and they start like abusing, like alcohol or whatever, and then you try to get them help, right? And then you work through them. Like that's growth in a positive way that's tangible, but. Like, and I guess that's my issue with a lot of this stuff is like it's too vague for what people talk about. And
Yeah, it is.
It matter long term.
So yeah, I think. Is there anything else you positive you want to discuss about this film? Again, we're not really going to hash through the plot because to the audience, like you better just watch it. Like
it's kind of a
character film,
semi love story, and someone who's trying to work through the character flaws.
It's a character driven narrative, right? So like us describing the characters will tell you like what the story kind of is. So I'm trying to think if there's another scene that I thought like touched upon something.
I was just like, man, they kind of cracked me up. I was like, where are they in New York to have that kind of space for their apartments? I was like, oh my Jesus. It was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, Melvin, you got it, right? He was wealthy. And I guess Simon, I will say this to the film, they kind of at least gave everybody an excuse of why they had the apartment, right? Simon was getting money from like, the parents, and then like he had built a little bit. Oh, he was cut off from the parents. Take it back.
Yeah, he was a successful artist, but he was bleeding money.
Yeah. Okay. So he was living beyond his means. Melvin was rich. Carol had like a sensible, crammed, like, way far out of town. Yeah. Her commute was garbage, so that's why it was cheaper. What's interesting is that at least that film did that, right? There's so many New York shows and stuff that's like, oh, look, I do nothing and I'm in this mansion. Sorry, go ahead.
Friends?
Yeah, Friends is a great example of that. Like, oh, I'm a waitress and I live here. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, they did say it was rent-controlled apartment. I was like, there's no way, dude.
Yeah, there's no way. Yeah. Yeah, I think. But yeah, I think we. Sorry, go ahead.
It was like a 2 to 3 bedroom apartment that was super spacious.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can take a little time to recap like what we found as problematic or just things that like.
I mean, let's just get into ratings. How about that?
Okay. Yeah. If you want to go first.
I was gonna come off. Do you want to go?
Yeah, you can go first.
All right, yeah. So I guess the strongest point, like we rehashed, right? This is kind of going to be a recap. I thought Jack Nicholson's performance was very good, right? If not for him, I definitely would not have been into this film at all, really. I thought Cuba Gooding gave a fairly decent performance. I can't really complain about Simon or Carol, but they were, I would say, two of the more lackluster performances, if that makes sense. And I don't think that was a fault to the actor and actress themselves. I think that was more to the way their characters were written. Personally, a lot of these films kind of suffered through cliches. I thought the pacing was just too slow for me. It didn't really keep me engaged. And I'll compare that again to 500 Days of Summer, which was like a rom-com drama. And it was some of the pacing and editing that they did with that film that was just a lot better, especially if you recall from that film where you had the dual scenes of reality versus expectation, right? They never did anything like that gave it this sort of edge to keep you engaged or nothing creative to keep you engaged in this film. It was kind of the same sort of style of filming that you see in, several hundred other romantic dramas, right? There was nothing that made it stand out specifically, aside from Jack Nicholson's portrayal of his OCD-ridden character. And yeah, this film just fell through too many cliches in terms of pretty weak characters that they wrote. So because of that, I have to give this film a 6.
I think that's fair. I think this film, the more I think about it, the more I understand why it hasn't aged too well. I will say that I think for me, what sticks out is that obviously Melvin's character is, honestly, it's probably the one thing that's probably iconic about this film, and probably what will somewhat let it pass to the ages of time. Also, I will say this, I'm thinking about this now off the cuff, but for the Academy to really recognize a movie that made such, now the Academy wouldn't dare nominate or really discuss a film of with this kind of the humor aspect of it. Yeah. So that I will say, Academy can't undo that, so they're stuck with that. So I do like that aspect of the film too. I thought even some of the Simon scenes were solid, were pretty good. And then the one Carol scene that's like, you know, probably the one good one that's like outstanding.
Which
it's the one where she's talking with her mom and she cries, you know, about like the life she wants, right?
Yeah, she's writing the letter.
Yeah, but I will say that, like, to your point, there's other films I have in the queue that, you know, they're just gonna be better than this one, and they're not even as highly regarded. I think what helps this movie is the star power. People forget that 70s, 80s, and 90s, Jack Nicholson was huge. Helen Hunt was actually big in the 90s with her show, her sitcom, and then you're right, the others were Rising. And actually, did you notice the one guy that had one scene that was from The Wire?
Which one?
The guy that when he asked where does Carol live and he gave him a tip, and it was what's his name?
Avon.
When I saw that, when I rewatched it after watching The Wire, I was just like, oh, Ava! I jumped. It was like I did not know that.
Like Julius.
Yeah, I had not seen that. So because the first time I saw that film, I had not watched The Wire, and then I think even the second time, but this third time, I was just like, oh, Avon! I was going nuts, and my brother was like, who's this Avon? Wire? So so my ratings are 6.5, a little bit higher. This one a few times a little bit higher, and I think it's because you know,
I think it's New York connection now.
No, I think it's because I think I'm gonna be honest, it's a little bit of bias. I think it's one of those films that I saw as like a 13-year-old because it was just a DVD like my dad had in his place, and it's a film that like that little nostalgia of me of like to my own like, you know, early film watching days, you know, like I remember watching the film with no expectations. I just saw the cover, which was Jack Nicholson's with the dog, and I was just like, what the heck is this? Like the title didn't even relate to what the cover was, right? And then just being really like I think the reason I come back to this film is because of Melvin. I think his character is really memorable, and I won't because it's funny, like every time passes, I never think of the film like, oh, it was really that great, but I always remember Melvin a lot. And I think each time that happens to me, it sucks me back into like, you know, rewatching it. So I think probably in 5 years it'll be the same deal, you know, and I think that is, you know, probably me personally why, you know, I stuck with a little half point there because I think I was always teetering. Is it a 6? Is it a 7? Is it, you know, I'll split it to the middle.
Same for this film, which doesn't always happen. You
said 6.5 or you said 6? I think you said 6.
Yeah, so we were right around.
Oh yeah, that's true. We're usually a little bit off by a point or two. Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, this is probably one of our shorter episodes because the film wasn't even that long, I think. Or was it long? I didn't feel like it was that.
It did feel long to me. I think they could have done 1 hour 45.
Okay. Because I know we've done like 2.5-hour films. It felt like,
and
actually, it was pretty long. I take it back.
It felt long. I will say, at least me.
No, I'll take it back. It is the film is longer than I thought. I just think that I think because the last stretch happens kind of fast, I don't remember it being long. But then I think back to it, I'm like, no, it was pretty long. Like,
I will tell you because I watched it several days ago. It felt long.
Yeah, because the road trip doesn't happen until like the final third, and I'm thinking like that's the part I remember the most. I'm like, okay. I forget all these other little scenes of him like just like walking and like going to the restaurant and just eating, and then like, you know, and then like, you know,
cut down. They could have made this characters longer. It could have been a much tighter, better film.
But yeah, that pretty much wraps up this week, I think.
Right.
So yeah, please like and subscribe. I did check our analytics. We have 7 subscribers now, so we have 1 more since last year.
You get 2 digits.
I get the 2 digits exactly. And I think because we haven't, I've scheduled some uploads of our other episodes. I think because of that, our traffic has gone down. But I think as we do more episodes, it'll come back up.
Sure.
But yeah.
Well, yeah. Anyways, we'll stay tuned to next week. If you enjoyed our commentary, please like and subscribe to our channel. And if you have any suggestions of films that you would like us to review, please let us know down in the comments, and we will definitely check that if we actually get some comments. So far, we only have a couple. Anyway, stay tuned to next week, and we're out.